Good morning, everyone. So today is the last class about ocular trauma. Today we'll be discussing non-mechanical injuries in this class. So until the last class, we have discussed different types of mechanical injuries, including closed globe injuries as well as open globe injuries and foreign bodies. So in this class, we'll be discussing non-mechanical eye injuries. Non-mechanical eye injuries commonly include chemical injuries, thermal injuries, ultrasonic injuries, electrical injuries, and radiational injuries. Now, among these, the important topic is chemical injuries of the eye. Chemical injuries of the eye is quite common. Chemical injuries of the eye can produce extensive damage to the ocular surface, including the conjunctiva, the cornea, the limbus, and as well as it may include the iris and the ciliary body. So chemical injuries of the eye can be very trivial, where there is only mild irritation. You all might have as well as have experienced that shampoo which we use is also a chemical. So occasionally while bathing, a bit of shampoo can fall in the eye, and that is what is a trivial chemical injury. Now, extensive chemical injuries are commonly encountered with acids as well as alkalis. So, what kind of chemical injuries can we commonly see are? We can see chemical injuries in domestic accidents where accidental contact with detergents, liquid ammonia, other solvents, all these can cause chemical injury, as well as in the agricultural field where the workers can encounter chemical injuries with pesticides, fertilizers, as well as in the chemical laboratories. And you can also see chemical injury where the other person tries to harm another person, especially in acid attacks. Chemical injuries are common, as well as a few psychopaths, they cause deliberate self-harm. Okay, so all these are common causes of chemical injuries. Now, chemical injuries are most commonly seen in young males, and definitely they are most common at workplaces versus home. Most of them are minor injuries, and most of them are due to alkalis. Now, broadly, the chemical injuries being caused can be broadly divided into alkali injuries and acid injuries. Now, what about alkali injuries? Now, what are the most common alkalis which we see? The most common alkalis are ammonia. Ammonia is commonly seen in your refrigerants, in your cleaning agents and fertilizers. Lye is another common agent which is nothing but sodium hydroxide. Then potassium hydroxide, which is nothing but your caustic potash. Sodium hydroxide is caustic soda. And lime, which is nothing but calcium hydroxide. It is most commonly seen in plasters, on the wall, whitewashes and cements. So all your hydroxides form your alkali injuries. Most common are your sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide, lime and ammonia. Lime is very common. Injury due to lime is very common. Now, among acids and alkalis, please remember it is not acids but alkali burns which are the most dangerous to the eye. So alkali burns are the most dangerous. Now, why are alkali burns most dangerous? The alkalis, they react with the fatty acids of the cell membrane and they saponify them, causing disruption of the cell membrane of the cells. Okay. Apart from that, they extract water from the cells, leading to necrosis of the cells, and they combine with lipids and other glycosaminoglycans and collagen, causing gelatinization or softening. So alkali burns invariably alter the structural integrity of the cell, leading to extensive necrosis and gelatinization. The higher the pH of the chemical indicates it is more alkaline, and so is the damage to the eye, which is worse than the lower pH of the chemical. So this is about alkali burns. So alkali burns are most dangerous. Now, as we have already discussed, this is lye, which is sodium hydroxide, commonly used to open clogged drains. And this is lime, commonly seen in plasters, whitewashes. And ammonia, all your household cleaning agents which you use, they contain ammonia. Now, what about acids? Acid burns are less severe than alkali. Why is it so? Is as soon as the acids reach the intracellular proteins, the proteins are instantly coagulated as well as denatured. So, as soon as the surface reach the epithelium, they coagulate the proteins and denature them, and this will act as a barrier and prevent deeper penetration of the acids into the tissues. So, the acids are not penetrating as deep as the alkalis into the ocular surface tissues because of coagulation of the proteins. Now, what are the common acids? Just brushing up your chemistry: sulfuric acid, sulfurous, hydrochloric, nitric acid, hydrofluoric acid, and acetic acid, which is found in vinegars. Vinegars is not your fruit vinegar, which is edible, but vinegar which are also used as cleaning agents. But the most severe injury is due to hydrofluoric acid. So, just a fun question here. There is a series where hydrofluoric acid is used, if anyone can name it. So, the common acid substances here include batteries, vinegar, glass polish, and nail polish remover. All these substances contain vinegar and acid, sorry. Now, what about the pathophysiology here? Now, what happens is, whether it is the acid or the alkali, what exactly happens is, initially, because of the effects, there is necrosis of the cells of the conjunctival and the corneal epithelium. And then surrounding the cornea is the limbus, and all the limbal vasculature gets occluded and disrupted. Because of the cut down of nutrition to the limbal stem cells, there is loss of the limbal stem cells as well. So followed by, when the corneal epithelium is lost, what happens is slowly the surrounding conjunctiva will start epithelial regrowth, and this conjunctiva will start creeping onto the corneal surface. So there is something called conjunctivalization of the corneal surface along with vascularization of the cornea. So by default, cornea is an avascular structure, but because of this entire damage which is happening, there is conjunctivalization and vascularization of the corneal surface. But sometimes what happens is, the damage might be so extensive that the epithelial defect will not heal. So there will be a persistent epithelial defect, and slowly there will be stromal involvement followed by corneal ulceration and perforation. Okay. Now, apart from the conjunctiva and the cornea, obviously there will be involvement of the eyelids as well. So in eyelids, there is symblepharon, that is formation of adhesions between the bulbar and the palpebral conjunctiva, as well as cicatricial entropyon. As we have already discussed, cicatricial entropyon is commonly due to burns, Stevens-Johnson syndrome, ocular cicatricial pemphigoid. So all these are the long-term effects on the eyelids. Now, sometimes after the corneal healing, what happens is, suppose the chemical penetrates deeper, there will be stromal ulceration, and later corneal opacification may occur instead of a corneal perforation. So the chronology of events can go in either direction, either a corneal ulceration and a perforation, or corneal ulceration followed by healing and finally corneal opacification. Now, in the anterior chamber, as I've already spoken, there can be damage to the iris and the lens. And epithelial damage, especially ciliary epithelial damage, it can impair ascorbate secretion. Ascorbate is typically required for collagen production and corneal repair. So all this can be impaired. And because of the ciliary damage, finally you can have hypotony because of the impaired aqueous secretion. And finally, the end result can be phthisis bulbi. So this is the pathophysiology in brief. Now this is all how pathophysiology happens during the damage phase of the chemical burn. Now in the healing phase, what happens is, as I've already told you, suppose there are undamaged limbal stem cells still present. Suppose the damage to the limbal stem cells due to vascular occlusion is not total, but still the remnant limbal stem cells can start migrating onto the corneal epithelium and cause epithelial regrowth. And corneal stroma, whatever stromal collagen has been damaged, is phagocytosed by keratinocytes, and finally new collagen is synthesized. Okay. Now, what are the clinical features of chemical burns? Symptoms: obviously there will be severe pain, there will be severe burning sensation, there will be lots of lacrimation, there will be photophobia, that is intolerance to normal light, blepharospasm, involuntary sustained closure of the eyes, and as well as diminution of vision if the corneal involvement is extensive. Now, the symptomatology has been discussed. Now about the signs. It can be divided broadly into 3 stages. Stage of acute ischemic necrosis, where the conjunctiva shows congestion, chemosis, necrosis, and a purulent discharge. Okay. The cornea can show sloughing of the epithelium. There can be edema of the cornea, and finally an opacified cornea. Now, as I've already told, in the stage of reparation, you can have conjunctival and corneal epithelium will regenerate, and the inflammation and vascularization will start subsiding in the stage of reparation. Now, in the stage of complications, as I've already told, a symblepharon can occur in the eyelid. The corneal ulceration, the epithelial defect can be persistent, and a recurrent corneal ulceration can occur. A complicated cataract in the secondary glaucoma can also result. Now we have 2 important classifications here. Now one is the Roper Hall classification of chemical burns, and the other is the newer classification, which is the Dua's classification by Harminder Dua. So Roper Hall classification, now pretty self-explanatory. We are classifying it into 4 grades based on limbal ischemia, corneal involvement. So in the first stage, there is no epithelial damage and there is no limbal ischemia. You can see all the surrounding limbus, it is well vascularized. Now, in the second stage, you can see there is slight amount of corneal haze in this picture. There is corneal haze, but still you can make out the iris in spite of this corneal haze in this part. And you can see there is limbal ischemia. You can see this part of the limbus looks relatively avascular compared to the other part of the limbus. This part looks relatively avascular. So when the limbal ischemia involves less than 1/3 of the area, it is grade 2, and the cornea is hazy, but iris details are still visible. Now coming to grade 3, here we have a guarded prognosis. The limbal ischemia can involve 1/3 to half of the area of the limbus. Here you can see there is total haze, and here you can see you cannot make out the iris details too clearly. It is not as clear as in the second grade where you can clearly make out. Here the iris details are obscured, somewhat obscured. Now in grade 4, which has a poor prognosis, limbal ischemia is more than half for sure. This is all limbal ischemia here, you can see. And definitely the cornea is opaque and you cannot make out the iris and the pupil details here. You cannot make out any iris and pupil details. So grade 1 is very good and grade 4 is poor. Okay, this is Roper Hall classification. Now this new classification by Dua is supposed to be more helpful in classifying chemical injuries. This has got 6 grades. So here we have graded it based on dividing it into fractions, limbal ischemia. Here the term is different. This is limbal involvement. This is limbal ischemia. This is limbal involvement. Here we grade it on the basis of clock hours involved. So 0, less than 3, 3 to 6, 6 to 9, 9 to 12 and more than 12. Pretty simple, not complicated. So this is limbal involvement, and apart from that, here we have discussed corneal involvement, but here we discuss conjunctival involvement. Okay. So 0, less than 30, 30 to 50, 50 to 75, 75 to 100, and total 100% involvement. So whenever it is all the 12 clock hours involved and 100% involvement, obviously the prognosis is going to be very poor. Both of these classifications, grade 1 is a very excellent or good prognosis, and grade 6 is the last grade. Grade 4 and grade 6 here have the poorest prognosis among all of them. So this classification is Dua's classification. Now just a brief look at Dua's here. We cannot make out in all the pictures, but here you can see there is no limbal involvement. We have an epithelial defect. There is no limbal involvement or corneal involvement. But in this case, you can see there is some amount of limbal involvement here. And in this case, you can see it is more extensive, involving 3 to 6 clock hours, as we have discussed. Okay, 3 to 6 clock hours can be involved here. Apart from the corneal involvement, please focus on the limbus involvement as well as the conjunctival involvement in this case. So there is more involvement of the cornea and of the conjunctiva and the limbus. Now have a look at this picture. There is total involvement all around. 360 degrees involvement of the cornea, the conjunctiva and the limbus. There is total involvement here. So this one carries the poorest prognosis among all of them. Okay. Now just a few pictures showing different types of chemical burns. So here you can see that this is an acute alkali burn. Now this picture of the cornea, this is the cornea, right? This is the cornea. This picture of the cornea is typically referred to as the cornea being white as chalk. Chalk as in chalk piece. The cornea is white as chalk here. And the surrounding conjunctiva, you can see you cannot make out the vasculature clearly. Everything appears blanched. So there is perilimbal blanching here, you can see. And in this part, you can clearly make out that the conjunctiva is not flat here, but definitely it is chemosed or edematous. It is filled with fluid here. There is lots of subconjunctival fluid causing this chemosis, and definitely the cornea is opacified. So this is how an acute alkali burn looks. Now another picture of severe alkali burn. Here you can see that the cornea is opacified. This might as well be a drug deposition on a persistent epithelial defect. And then definitely there is again perilimbal blanching, or there is loss of vasculature at the limbus, and obviously there is conjunctival involvement in all this part. The conjunctiva is involved in all this part. Okay, this is again an example of an alkali burn. Now one more picture. This you can say is somewhat in the later stages, where you can see again the cornea is white as chalk. It's also referred to by a fancy term known as cooked fish eye. Okay, this is a fancy term here. Now you can also see, apart from the cornea healing itself and forming this opacified scar, there is vascularization. By default, cornea is avascular, but you can see there is lots of vascularization of the cornea from all 360 degrees. So all this vascularization has occurred, including superficial and deep. The superficial vessels are tortuous and the deep vessels are relatively straight and radial in orientation. Okay. So this is vascularization of the cornea. Apart from that, in this picture, you can also see that there is erythema of the eyelid. Even the eyelid is definitely involved here. Now this is again one more picture. There is lots of severe corneal vascularization over here. It is an opacified cornea. And then we can also notice this part. Then this part there is a symblepharon. As I've already told you, symblepharon is adhesion between the palpebral and the bulbar conjunctiva. Now why has the symblepharon attached here? As I've already told, in persistent epithelial defects at later stages, you can have conjunctivalization of the cornea. And so this part of the cornea becomes covered by conjunctival epithelium. And so the symblepharon has come and adhered in this part. So all said and done, symblepharon is adhesion between palpebral and bulbar conjunctiva. Okay. So this is where the symblepharon has occurred. with extensive vascularization of the cornea. Now, this is again a live burn, that is sodium hydroxide or caustic soda. So you can see again there is symblepharon formation here, extensive symblepharon here and here from the eyelids, and there is severe deposition of the chemicals. Okay. Again, this is how your super glue injury or your Fevikwik, all these injuries will look like. So you can see that it has scarred the cornea and it is difficult to remove it. It might need a lamellar keratoplasty in this case. Again, one more injury from hot aluminium. Again, the same thing, conjunctivalization of the corneal surface. You can see there is lots of erythema and edema of the lower lid margin here, and lots of angry looking vascularization over the cornea. Now in this case, you can see that this is the opacified cornea. This is just 2 weeks after injury. You can see that a pannus is slowly beginning to creep onto the cornea. Now pannus, as you already know, it consists of vascularization as well as cellular infiltration. So this is how it looks. And 3 weeks, again the vascularization is growing, but you can notice a change in the cornea. The cornea is definitely more clear than the previous one. Now this is not a good sign here because the cornea is becoming thinner and thinner, and in the third stage you can see there is extensive pannus, but at the same time the cornea has thinned out pretty much and is forming something known as a desmetocele here, which is now the weakest part, and this indicates an impending corneal perforation. And after 8 weeks, you can see that there is a frank perforation of the cornea here. Now, this is what a course of non-healing persistent epithelial defect will look like in a severe alkali burn. Instead of forming this healing scar like this, it is forming something like a frank perforation here. Okay. Now, this is how acid injuries look like. As I've already told you, acid injuries are not as severe as alkali burns. You can still have edema and congestion of the cornea. You can have mild epithelial defects. You can see there is an involvement of opaque cornea right here. And you can also have symblepharon formation, as you can see from acid injuries. Now, what is the McCully's classification of chemical injury? Very simple. In the first 1 week, what happens? It is divided from 7 days, 7 to 21 days, and more than 21 days. In the first 1 week, what happens is whatever limbal stem cells are present, they will start trying to grow over the epithelial defect of the cornea. So, in the first 1 week, the undamaged limbal stem cells will start trying to cover the corneal epithelial defect. In between 7 to 21 days, what happens is, along with the limbal stem cells, you have the conjunctival and corneal epithelium, which will regenerate, and also keratocytes, which will produce collagen for the corneal stroma. So epithelium is being covered by the conjunctival and the corneal epithelium, and the stromal collagen is being taken care of by the keratocytes, which synthesize new mature collagen. Now, but one factor hampering this thing between 7 to 21 days, the healing process is when there is mature collagen synthesis production, what happens is during the same time, the enzyme collagenase, which destroys collagen, also starts peaking its production during the same time. So whatever treatment we give should be to enhance the collagen synthesis and decrease the collagenase production. So what about late repair? That is after 21 days. If there are some minor defects, what happens is the defect gets covered from the limbal stem cells. Suppose most of the limbal stem cells are intact, but a part of the limbal stem cells have been damaged. Then in that part, the conjunctiva will take over and cause conjunctivalization. Suppose there is 360 degrees damage to the limbal stem cells, then there would be obviously be 360 degrees conjunctivalization. So whenever there is migration from the limbal stem cells, you can expect the epithelial defect to heal nicely. But when there is migration from the conjunctival cells, which usually happens in severe defects, then you can expect conjunctivalization and potential scarring and vascularization of the cornea. Now, what is the treatment? The very first thing which you have to remember whenever there is a chemical injury, because tomorrow you can be general practitioners, you can choose whatever is your field of specialty, but once someone comes running to you and says something has fallen into my eye, chemical injury, some chemical has fallen, please do not waste your time asking about the history, what time it has fallen, what happened to the eye. Please don't look into it. Straight away make the patient lie down and start washing the eye thoroughly with clean water or saline, whatever is available. And please remember, chemical injury is an ocular emergency. It is a true ocular emergency. So just make the patient immediately lie down and start thoroughly washing it with saline and water. And please wash it with a minimum of 20 minutes. Okay, that is because if you have a litmus paper, you can actually stop after 10 minutes and check for the pH of the conjunctiva or the cornea. You can just rest the litmus paper there and check for the pH. If the pH has restored to normal, but if you don't have it, please wash the eye thoroughly for at least 20 minutes with about 2 to 3 liters of water or saline. Continuously flush the eye. And once you have flushed the eye, you can ask the patient for what sort of chemical has fallen into the eye and how long before did it occur. Okay. Now, after immediate and thorough washing of with saline, irrigating the cul-de-sac, the next point is mechanical removal of contaminant. Suppose something like lime has fallen into the eye. He will obviously have tiny specks of lime or cement-like material or plaster material in the fornices or in the conjunctival, palpebral conjunctival site. So it's important to evert the eye and look for all these particles and remove it with the help of a moist cotton swab. Okay, that is important. Now, what about removal of contaminated and necrotic tissue? Like when you're washing the eye itself, you can obviously see that there is some sort of corneal epithelium which has undergone necrosis and it is loosely attached now. So with the help of a moist cotton swab, please remember to moisten it with proparacaine topical anesthetic drops. Actually, when you're in a hospital setup and you have topical anesthetic drops, it is better to first instill topical anesthetic drops and then do irrigation of the eye. But if it is not available, go straight away for irrigation. When you're trying to remove this loosely attached to necrosed corneal epithelium with a cotton swab, please remember to instill topical proparacaine anesthetic eye drops and then remove the corneal tissue with a cotton swab. Whatever conjunctival tissue is there, if it can be removed with a cotton swab, it can be removed. If not, it should be carefully excised. Now, these are all the measures to prevent further damage. This is all the immediate first aid thing you can do. Thorough irrigation, removal of any mechanical tiny specks of contaminant, and you can remove the contaminated necrotic tissue. Now, what are the drops which you can instill? Now, topical antibiotic drops like moxifloxacin 4 to 5 times a day to prevent infection. Obviously, antibiotics to prevent infection. Now, steroids primarily have an anti-inflammatory action as well as they can be used in case of anterior uveitis. If it occurs in case of chemical injury, there can be iritis, there can be anterior uveitis. So, steroids have to be used in such a case. And moreover, steroids, please remember again, they impair wound healing to a certain extent. So after 2 weeks, when this collagen production is peaking up, it is important to cut down the steroids and carefully taper them and monitor the response to steroids. So that is important. Now again, cycloplegics like atropine, they relieve ciliary spasm, which might occur. And obviously they have a role to play in anterior uveitis. Now, lubricating eye drops are to be used. Why do you use lubricating eye drops? Obviously, the ocular surface becomes dry and it has a greater potential for keratinization. So, lubricant eye drops are used to thoroughly lubricate the ocular surface. Now, what about autologous serum? Autologous serum, it is used rarely when the chemical injury is not so responsive, but definitely the top four are very, very commonly used. Okay. Autologous serum, it contains growth factors, some collagenase inhibiting factors and all. So this also promotes wound healing or repair of the wound. Now there are three other measures. Ascorbic acid in the form of 10% sodium ascorbate eye drops and sodium citrate as 10% eye drops. Both are 10%. Okay, this is sodium citrate, this is sodium ascorbate. Both are 10%. This will promote collagen synthesis. Sodium ascorbate, sodium citrate will inhibit collagenase. That is the enzyme destroying collagen. It will inhibit collagenase production. This is promoting collagen synthesis. Along with that, you can also use systemic use, that is vitamin C tablets, 1 to 2 gram orally per day. This will also promote wound epithelial healing. Okay, systemic usage of vitamin C. Now, doxycycline is very important in not only chemical injuries, but in a lot of other things. You have seen doxycycline being even commonly used in mebonitis or your posterior blepharitis. Okay. So, doxycycline is important here because this doxycycline, again the dosage is 100 milligrams BD. Doxycycline will chelate the metal zinc. It will chelate zinc. Now, why is zinc required? Zinc is required for collagenase. Okay. So, by chelating zinc, collagenase production is hampered to a large extent. So, doxycycline decreases collagenase and therefore thereby increases the collagen production and therefore it helps in wound healing. So, please remember antibiotic eye drops, steroid eye drops, cycloplegics, lubricants, vitamin C, doxycycline, and if you can remember, ascorbate and citrate. Okay, pretty simple. Now, we finished with basic treatment of chemical injury whenever it occurs. What about treatment of complications? So, for complications, we have secondary glaucoma. Now, as I've said, there can be iritis in chemical injuries. So anything can cause a secondary glaucoma, and whenever there is rise of intraocular pressure, as we've already learned previously in glaucoma chapter, we can use timolol 0.5% twice a day, along with oral acetazolamide 250 milligrams QID, that is 4 times a day. So secondary glaucoma treated with topical timolol and systemic acetazolamide. Okay. Now, suppose, as I've already told you, suppose there is limbal stem cell deficiency and there is a persistent epithelial defect. Then definitely you have to try to cover the cornea with an amniotic membrane graft with or without limbal stem cell transplantation. Now, pseudopterygium, this was one of the differential diagnosis of pterygium which we have learned. Pseudopterygium, again similarly to pterygium, which occurs usually after chemical burns, ocular cicatricial pemphigoid Stevens-Johnson syndrome. Again, the treatment is similar to pterygium, either a conjunctival limbal autograft or an amniotic membrane graft, along with enhanced by anti-mitotic drugs like mitomycin C, which decreases the risk of recurrence. Okay. Now, symblepharon, as we've seen in pictures, definitely it needs surgical treatment like symblepharectomy, where you have to excise the connection, the symblepharon, and later the raw surfaces can be covered by mucous membrane grafts or continuous eye ointments or shells. Now, end stage, where there is a corneal opacity and there is no more potential vision, the cornea can be replaced by a donor cornea, which is known as keratoplasty, or in severe cases where keratoplasty is not feasible, you can place a keratoprosthesis fashioned out of a tooth. It is also known as odontokeratoprosthesis. Now you can see these are the symblepharons. These need to be excised here. Okay. And what happens is there is a shortening of the fornices in chemical injuries. The fornices, which are usually deep, become shortened and shallow. leading to epiphora or watering. There is a need to re-establish the conjunctival phonesis, and as we have learned, there can be lid deformities like entropyon here, so leading to trichiasis. So correction of eyelid deformities can also be done. And here you can see a keratoprosthesis, which is an optical cylinder, is placed. Here it is not a donor cornea, but in the host cornea itself, an opening is created and an optical cylinder is placed. Okay, so this is a keratoprosthesis here. Okay. Now, other non-mechanical injuries include thermal injuries. Now, thermal injuries, it can be either due to flame burns or contact burns with hot liquids or other hot objects. So, there can be conjunctival congestion and chemosis, edema. There can be corneal burns. So, there can be corneal opacification like leucoma formation, or there can be extensive sloughing of the cornea leading to a staphyloma formation. The whole cornea is sloughed away and the underlying iris comes in adherence with the pseudocornea as a staphyloma, or there can also be a symblepharon formation. Okay. Now this is how an extensive thermal burn looks like. You can see here, there is cicatricial ectropyon here. Due to the scar tissue, the eyelid has turned outwards. And you can see there is extensive conjunctival congestion as well as chemosis. And you can see that the eyelid is very much hyperemic and edematous. And in this picture, you can see that there is corneal ulceration and opacification. Here you can see there is definitely a frank corneal ulcer with extensive maceration and necrosis of the periocular tissues here. So this is how a thermal burn picture usually presents like. Now, again the same treatment, thorough irrigation with saline, application of antibiotic cream for the eyelids, and again for the cornea, same treatment, antibiotics, lubricating eye drops, steroids, and atropine. Again, there is full thickness burns of the eyelid, you would require grafting. And glass rod is passed in the phonesis. Why is this done? Is to prevent symblepharon formation. Okay. Again, for leukomatous corneal opacity, you can go for penetrating keratoplasty or lamellar keratoplasty. If it is a smaller area involved, you can go for an amniotic membrane graft or limbal stem cell transplantation. The treatment is pretty much the same, except that if the lids are involved extensively, you go for full thickness grafting. The other treatment is pretty much the same. Most of the features you can write by remembering these pictures. Okay. Just go in order involving the conjunctiva, the cornea, the lids, and they can also be, because of the nature of the injuries, there can be extensive uveitis as well as panophthalmitis. Now, electrical injuries, obviously there can be a point of entry and exit. So on the lid burns indicate that there is an entry wound. In cornea, you can have interstitial opacities, diffuse or punctate interstitial opacities, that is at the level of stroma, can be present in the cornea. There can be iritis, there can be spasm, ciliary spasm, and there can also be irritation of the sphincter pupillae leading to miosis, and there could be ciliary muscle spasm leading to spasm of accommodation. And this is how an electric cataract presents in a stellate or a star-shaped configuration. This is how an electric cataract presents. In the retina, there can be lots of hemorrhages, disc edema, retinal edema, and optic nerve involvement can show optic neuritis. So the last one is radiational injuries. Now radiational injuries, they can include UV rays, infrared rays, as well as ionizing radiations like X-rays and beta rays, as well as radiotherapy for orbital tumors. So ionizing radiations can lead to loss of lashes, conjunctival scarring, that is keratoconjunctivitis, and cataract formation. UV radiations now damage to the corneal epithelium. There is a condition known as photoophthalmia, which you come across in your cornea. Because of exposure to UV radiations while looking directly at the sunlight, then you can have corneal epithelium damage, which results in multiple epithelial erosions. Or it can also be due to exposure to UV radiations during the welding or during short circuit. So this is all photoophthalmia. And visible radiation, you know that during eclipses, when we look at a solar eclipse, there is something known as solar retinopathy. Okay, solar retinopathy is due to solar maculopathy is due to gazing, sun gazing. Okay, infrared radiation, you have read in your cataract chapter, a glass blows cataract can occur, and welding arc injuries, as we've already discussed, it is again results in photoophthalmia due to UV radiations. Okay. Now the final thing, for prevention of non-mechanical injuries, it is important to educate the patient about the importance of wearing protective eyewear at workplaces and in sports activities. And also, it is important to avoid eye injuries in children with household items. And it is important that the industries introduce perfect safety norms at workplaces regarding protection of the eyes. So in today's class, please stress on chemical injuries, treatment, the treatment part, and the general alkali and acid burns. So this is about ocular trauma. With this, we complete ocular trauma. Any queries? So the syllabus would include, like, from your first internal exam, what has been covered. I think we finished till glaucoma. Was glaucoma, your glaucoma was included in first internal exam, right? Uh, so from there, whatever topics, yeah, so glaucoma was there. So after that, whatever topics were covered, and next week even community ophthalmology will be taken. So till community ophthalmology, your syllabus will be included. Community and systemic, I guess. Systemic will, I'll confirm that with sir. Sir will be taking next week community and systemic ophthalmology. So even he will be confirming if systemic is included, but community ophthalmology for sure is included. So whatever topics which were not included in first internal and all the remaining topics, for sure even community. So all these will be included as already told by sir. The pattern will be your standard university paper, not MCQs. Okay, so this is a standard paper. Any other queries? Orbital injuries, they will be covered there is still class on orbit left. So orbital injuries will be covered under the section of orbit. Sympactic ophthalmitis has not been discussed because it was already discussed under uveitis. So that's about it. So orbital injuries will not be there for your exam for sure. Okay. Okay then. So that's about it. Okay, so with this, I end this class. Thank you, everyone.